Are we live? Oh, yeah, so. Nice to see you. And we're live. Yeah, cool. Just catching up with the delay. That was not the song Tom's Diner by Susan Vega. That was my own composition that just happens to have the same notes in the same order. And welcome. Thanks for joining. Hi, Darius. Hi, TechRight. Hi, Bun. I can't remember. What did I call this stream today? Let's have a look. Let's do a window in a window. Inception. Grimdark and Dark Fantasy Games. Live Games Crit from Design Professor. Now, I have to always caveat when I call myself a professor that in America, that basically means anyone who teaches at college level is a professor. But in the UK, you basically have to be a university lecturer for like 20 years to be a professor. So I'm definitely a professor in the American sense because I've taught in a couple of different universities. But I'm not a professor in the British sense because to get a professorship in a British university, you have to work there for a long time, and then you have to do things that management like I don't know, not be in the union and things like that. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, we're doing Grimdark Dark Fantasy Games today. So what I've been doing is when we get our applicants to Indies Under the Knife and people send their games in, I'm trying to make sure these streams are a little bit more appealing by making sure that we kind of categorize them by what sort of games they are and what the appeal of those games is. Because otherwise we just get 4 random games, and that can be fun if you're super into game design, but it doesn't really give anything... to appeal to people who are just like gamers who are interested in finding out about some new games. And ultimately, I think, you know, people send their games in for feedback, but they do want exposure as well. So let's try and make sure they get exposure to the right people. So hopefully we'll have a few people pop in today who are just here to see some games so they can think, oh, I like the look of that game. I might buy it in a year when it's finished, or in 10 years when it's finished. So I've got 2 that are on Steam, and 2 that have been sent to me via itch.io. We're going to do the Steam ones first, just because it's a little bit easier. Ashes of Morgravia is a deck builder, I believe, that I've joined the playtest for. And then we've got Mega Quest, which is some sort of Metroidvania type thing. And it says I can play it with a controller. So we're going to do that today. And I haven't left my controller on the floor pushing a button in a random direction, which happened last time, which is fun. This game needs a controller. Okay. Always irks me when people make very twitchy genres of games and leave the controller support as an afterthought. Hi, Jared. Thanks for joining. We've got some strange windowing going on here. Put myself down, go into my little medical box in the corner. Man. Every time I try and move the chat on my other screen, it switches the screen mode on the game. We will be there in a minute. I might have to play windowed though, to avoid all of this tomfoolery. Drop frames, which sucks. There we go. 3,400 kilobytes per second. That's better. Ah, we've got some... some very strange MIDI acoustic guitar here. Feels like an odd choice. She moves nice. Bit of a floaty jump. This requires a yellow key. Was I supposed to immediately go out there? I'm probably going to turn the graphics down on this one because I think we're getting a lot of delay. So if you're seeing this and it's quite blurry and feels a bit slow, yeah, I'm sure some of that is the internet, but also I think they've done... This doesn't feel very optimized for what the game is. But that's with all of those blurring effects turned off. It's a bit too bright now, things, but all of the blur and everything made it feel really sluggish. It still feels quite sluggish. So let's just go through what I can do. We've got a kind of combat Metroidvania, like a kind of classic Castlevania type one. I've got a knife. So I'm gonna. It's gonna feel a bit like I'm going straight into laying into this game. But we only have half an hour with each game. It's a 2-hour stream with 4 games scheduled. And I want to just make sure we go straight to, you know, candidly addressing the problems with this game. Stop and start. Stop and start. And then in terms of visual design, you've got a purple character on a purple background, right? And this is a background, right? And this is a problem that comes from sort of maybe wanting to make things match. And, you know, the UI stands out. We've got a lot of colours in the UI that stand out from the general kind of purpleness. I think having a little bit of differentiation between the main character and the background would be helpful. One of the things you will notice in a lot of these sort of action-based games, whether they're roguelikes or Metroidvanias or whatever, is they start you in an area where there's a high contrast color between the character and the background. So in Hades, you're a red and black color between the character and the background. So in Hades, you're a red and black character on a green background. By seeing what you can do. Later on, it doesn't matter if they put you on a red background, because by then you can tell how everything in the game works. But starting with a purple character and a purple background is a bit of a problem. Vivian, come forth. We ask for you, Darkest One. Matron, I am at your service. That's how Vivi talks. Reports have reached us of a gaping chasm within the chapel in the east. Rumor has it that it is Necromancer's lair. A dungeon of the... Sega arcade game from like but this font currently makes it look a way of doing typography that feels like it fits in the world, you know. And then about the music, as far as I can tell, these are actual sort of guitar concertos, like existing classical music guitar concertos. And I think the problem with doing that in a fantasy setting is that is a kind of historical piece of music that makes people think of the real world, right? Whereas this is a fantasy world. And it's a bit strange to have like a real piece of classical music in a fantasy world. I think it kind of feels a bit strange to me. I don't know whether other people will find it strange. I kind of get what they're going for, because it's kind of that Diablo thing of using kind of moody Spanish guitar with dark fantasy. So it's not a bad choice overall, but it just having those very kind of recognizable concertos feels a bit strange in this setting. So that's with the graphics on medium. I personally find all of this blur, particularly with the camera tracking you, I find a lot of this blur a little bit much. Yeah, sorry that the stream keeps stopping. I complained to service provider a couple of weeks ago. It worked better for a while, and now it's not again. That's cool, whatever that is. But yeah, that primary attack is just so sluggish. And even if I put the graphics down below, we lose all the darkness of the kind of art style. But even then, and I think some of this probably comes from like using a pack of animations that are designed for another sort of game. You know, that's the kind of animation you can get away with in like an MMO where the camera's zoomed out and we're not playing when we're not paying a very high amount of attention to the character. But in something like this, it's like a single character driven action game. It's like the animation is just way too sluggish for this type of thing. There we go. Right, I just got an upgrade that gives me a quick blade. Again, yeah, just the visual contrast. White and purple on white and purple. And I'd much rather have the camera much more zoomed out and the camera moving less. And I think some of this comes down to genre research, because I can't think of a game in this genre where the camera sort of tracks you one-to-one like that. Sound of the game down a little bit because some of these sounds are quite harsh. Okay, so that's a checkpoint, I think. It just feels, again, like one of these passion projects where the developer has made a lot of content before really refining the base activity that you're doing. You know, when you see people who've made lots and lots of games develop a game, and if they were going to kind of develop something like this, you would have a lot of kind of prototyping of the to get all of these things right. Right, I've got a bow. I've got a spell. I can't really tell how those two things are different because they feel very similar to use. I've got a shield. I'll start trying to use the shield and seeing... Oh, that's only got collision from one side. Is that meant to be? Yeah, we've got like a Mario kind of... You can jump through platforms thing. Which doesn't work with this kind of level of visual fidelity. Again, if we pull the camera back and it's a little bit more cartoony and abstract, we can justify jumping through and stuff. Yeah, Stanley Rose in the chat said a room-based camera would be better, and I wouldn't say it's kind of making me feel sick or anything like that, but it sort of means that you can't really plan how you're going to move around a room, right? Because if you play something like a Castlevania or Rogue Legacy or something like that, you can usually see the whole room unless it's a very big room. And that means if you're kind of fighting 3 enemies in a tight space, you can sort of see all the areas you can jump out to, and if there's anything you can bounce off of and all of that kind of stuff, and you can plan it as you go. But if the camera is constantly moving, it sort of damages your spatial awareness of the room you're fighting in. Like, every piece of combat that we've seen so far would be kind of more fun to execute. You would be able to kind of do it with more skill and more kind of tactical thinking if the camera was just showing you the whole room and not doing this constant tracking thing, right? It doesn't help. It feels like it doesn't feel like a decision that's been made with thought towards what games in the genre usually do. And I guess this setting, I'm a dark elf with a stabby knife in a scary castle, right? What is the kind of design pillar of this? What is the thing we're trying to make someone experience? It's being a cool, fast character that's really dangerous and deadly. And every time you do something that gets in the way of the player feeling like they can do cool stuff, you're damaging that kind of design pillar. This requires a blue key. That feels very arcadey as well, having like primary coloured keys. I do like the bow though. I think the bow feels pretty good for a platformer bow. But I do want to be able to aim it in the air. And again, I think a lot of this just comes down to genre research. Of like, what are the best combat platformers? You know, whether they're Metroidvanias or not. Like, I don't know whether you consider Rogue Legacy a Metroidvania because it's got procedural generation in it. But games that do this kind of combat in a platformer kind of space, and then just playing, like, even just playing the demos of them and seeing how things feel. Because when people play games, they're sort of using the lock now, because I jumped through that wooden bit, and now I'm in an area that I don't seem to be able to get out of, so I think I'm soft locked. We also don't really have any way of navigating. Yeah, I don't have a mini-map or anything, so it's very hard for me to kind of tell where I've been, right? If you think of what the mini-map in this kind of game usually achieves, it allows me to die and then come back and go, right, where am I going? The kind of loop in this is kind of I die, and if I really care, then I can maybe remember which way I was going before and go a different way or something like that. But it's, I do have a map, yeah. I do have a map, yeah. Well spotted. Yeah, it's because they've used the kind of Google Maps icon for that. I wouldn't have noticed. So, closest portal is where we respawn to. There's a treasure up there, so I'm going to go towards the treasure. So having the mini-map changes quite a bit, because now we can actually plan. And if you can't plan, you can't sort of set your own goals of where you're going next. Yeah. You lose. See, part of the problem with the combat at the moment is I don't feel super invested with trying to kill these guys because it doesn't feel good to do. And I know that's a very standard comment that I make about a lot of action games, but it's also why, you know, when you're prototyping something like this, it's why people build grey boxes for a long time before they start doing stuff like level design, because it's just really important that if you're making a combat-driven game, the combat feels nice. It feels quite decent to be taking things off from a distance. But when you're up close and you're hitting things, it just... I think because it's not very dynamic, the way that... Tranquilizer darts or poison darts. Where does that replace my bow? Okay, I've got darts now. That's cool. Yeah, loads of effort has gone into this in terms of like adding lots of different things you can unlock and stuff like that. But I just think that doesn't feel particularly cool, you know. The melee. But yeah, I'm going to need to switch to the next game now if we're going to get through all 4. But I would say, like, strong points of this, I think generally it looks quite nice. I think there are legibility problems with the purple character on her. Just doesn't really... It kind of makes it feel like an arcade game, and I don't think that's what you're going for here. I think you're going for an epic quest that takes multiple sessions rather than, like I said, sort of 2005 Sega arcade kind of thing. And then I think just the up-close melee combat feels quite bad because I'm not entirely sure what it is. It just kind of feels like you're standing there and doing an attack, and people don't fight like that. You know, people kind of use their whole bodies when they fight. And some of that, I think, is going to be reduced if you do pull the camera back out and do sort of full room cameras. Because part of the problem is just we can see the character so close up, we can see her animations so close up, and it just draws attention to the fact that the animations don't work. So I think there are a lot of small problems here, but I think some of them can be solved by doing the same thing. You know, if we address how the camera works and stop having the camera so zoomed in, following everything very close up, then it's going to make the animations look better. And I've seen this in lots of games. People put the camera really close up, and it's often because they're sort of proud of their art and they want you to be able to see the detail in the art or something like that. But for the gameplay functionality, you need to pull it way back. And there's a kind of give or take here that will exist in any game between, oh, we've spent time on this art, we want people to see it close up, versus what works best for gameplay. But what works best for gameplay in this style of game is generally a fixed camera on the whole room, which only moves when it absolutely has to, and is zoomed out as possible to give you enough kind of contextual information about what's going on around you. The whole of the time the camera is moving, it's kind of making it hard to read the environment around you and see where the kind of opportunities in the room are. So I think that's the biggest problem at the moment, and some of the other things like, you know, colors not contrasting enough and the typography are smaller details. But the melee combat doesn't feel good, but partially I think that is because we're just too close and we can sort of see the animation a bit too close up as well. Okay, next one. That was, and if you're interested in checking that one out, I think it's a kind of playtest where you have to join it. That one's called Mega Quest. And yeah, you know, you've got some real love and care that's gone into these illustrations and the kind of 3D assets in the game. I don't know how much of that game comes from asset packs, but it is quite consistent, right? And I don't care how people make their assets for games as long as they're reasonably consistent. But yeah, it's kind of that very high gloss 3D art that, it makes the issues with the user interface and the typography stand out even more, I think. Yeah, I think the UI was generally quite good. Like the iconography and everything in the UI was quite good, and it stood out quite well. There was like color contrast in terms of the little moves in the corner and everything, but the typography just needed work to kind of bring it up to the same level as the other visual parts of the game. Ashes of Morgravia, we have 1% until it's downloaded, so I don't know how long that 1% is because it's been downloading for a while. So let me just jump onto the ones that we've got from itch. We've got Lurking Behind, which is a top-down action game, and we've got Valkyrie Rosetta, which is some sort of turn-based RPG thing. I'm going to go on to Lurking Behind first, because it's got a good name. This is by Morantis Dev here. They've got a TikTok for the whole game, which I think is a cool idea. And we've got some character selection. So we've got kind of top-down Hotline Miami type thing. And we've got two characters that are sort of starter characters and a character that is a more advanced one that's based on parrying. I am never going to pick the parrying character. We've got a safe area. We've got some safe sounding music. We've got some sort of meta upgrading Hades type thing where you can make an item available later on. Magic Blast. So I hold to pick that up, and then I can assign it myself. I quite like games where you can assign your own controls. Like in Diablo 3, it felt like this was part of the game for me, like this sort of trying to map things onto where they felt coolest, which is a bit silly, but you know. We all have our quirks. I'm going to put my sword on there, and that on there. There's a big oogly boogly in some sort of shield. Challenge the boss. Makes the floor guardian vulnerable and transports it and the player into an area for the final battle. To activate requires power from similar looking 3 power seals that are scattered around the dungeon. Okay, so this is a boss. I think we have to go around the dungeon and power up and then decide when to fight the boss. Yeah, it is Dungeons Miami, totally. Got a... I like the way these guys kind of jib into lots of little bits. That's fun. Sword attack, again, kind of feels a little bit weak. Cool enemy designs, though. Look, you can see this guy's got these horns, so he's going to act like a bull and kind of charge us. I think I've already lost most of my health. Got little ballista things. Again, contrast between the colors used in the character palettes and the backgrounds could be a bit higher here. Right, so if you're going to use these kind of muted, desaturated greys, pick a place to use them. So if we're going to have grey in our dude and our enemies, then make all of the greys in the background not actually grey. Make them like green or blue or purple or something. If you look at a lot of really successful dungeon run games, that's what they do, right? They sort of differentiate between the characters in the background so that it doesn't all blend together. I've got 2 knifey things now. I've got my sword and I've got a binny. I really like the enemy variety that we're getting shown straight away. It's already showing me that I'm going to need to sort of learn the behaviors of these different enemies. You know, the red one runs at you, the big kind of yellow Minotaur thing has a big spinning attack that it doesn't do very often, but when it does, you need to stay away from it entirely. There's a lot of enemy behavior to learn here, right? If we compare it to the last game, I could sort of, in the last game, I could kind of look at the enemies and go, oh, that's a flying enemy, that's a walking enemy, that's a ranged enemy. But there wasn't as much going on as there is here in terms of really needing to understand how each one moved. But this guy's got like 3 heads, and 2 of them are actually sort of punches that come out. And I think these chests are like shops where you kind of have to save up enough to get soul fragments. That requires 10 soul fragments. I've got 9. I need to remember that I've got a dash as well. I'm so used to dash being on the sort of circle position on most controllers. If it's not there, I forget I've got it. Right, I've got enough soul fragments to open this chest now. Fermented snake mixture, delicious. Didn't really read what that did. Let's say remove poison and apply poison resistance. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about mapping things onto combinations of triggers, like having to press 2 triggers at the same time. So, in terms of the camera movement on this one, I'm not finding it terrible to play with. But what I will do is I'm going to save 5 minutes at the end of this one so we can go and compare it to Hotline Miami and kind of look at how the camera moves in that, because I think I do have that in my Steam library, and I think having a quick look to compare might be helpful. I'm not finding the movement of the camera troublesome so much, but I do again think it's a little bit close in. And I expect this is something that the developer has already kind of experimented with a fair amount, because you sort of have to in a game like this, with kind of playtesting and stuff. But I would generally think about where the character is looking and sort of bias the camera over that way a little bit. That is actually what it's doing. If we look here, if I turn in 4 directions, the camera is sort of drifting towards where the character is facing, which I think is what I would want. But it doesn't, it's kind of not extreme enough to give us more information in that direction. Only gives us a little bit more information when we turn in a particular direction. Yeah, Darius in the chat said that kind of first move when you turn feels a bit fast, a bit aggressive. I think that might be true, yeah. I think I might want it to go further forward, but more slowly. But these things are really hard to kind of know without testing it. They're like, they're second order problems, right? You can't really know the outcome of making a tweak to something like that is so sort of guttural, and sort of based on weird perceptual things that you just don't know until you're feeling them. But yeah, the thing I would try is the camera being zoomed out a tiny bit, and it going a bit further towards the direction you're facing, and it making that change a bit more slowly, because yeah, doing this doesn't feel good. And that means if I'm in a combat situation where I'm having to turn left and right lots because there's enemies around me and I'm trying to turn and attack them all, then the camera's going to be sort of like doing this, which is not going to be a great experience. I think I walked in some sludge that time. Let me just check Hotline Miami is actually on my hard drive at the moment while we're here, because I want to quickly check that. And again, kind of bringing back that topic of genre research, of very easy to kind of make a game that's like another game and just think you know how that game works and just do it from memory instead of actually going back and checking it, you know? I like that. Punch. Punching glove. Big knockback weapon. That's fun. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this game in terms of content variations. Like, every weapon I've picked up feels very different to use. It feels like it's a different thing to kind of learn and master. The enemies are different from each other in really fun ways. I think there are some camera issues that can only be solved through experimentation, but I do think we're a little bit too zoomed in again. And I just think, you know, part of the issue with this kind of theme of this Grimdark kind of theme and how it plays into the art style is we've just got a lot of grey on grey. And I would just try and think about, oh, who is doing that? Who is doing that horrible blood thing on me with the crazy pentagrams? I would just think about, you know, trying to create a little bit more color contrast between characters in the environment. Because, like, if you look at that ballista over there at the moment, is almost invisible. And that means that when there's quite a few enemies on the screen, if there's one like that that's in a big pile of gore, like, maybe the gore needs to fade a little bit after it's hit the ground as well. Because that visual noise created by all that gore is really satisfying to sort of paint the level with your enemies' entrails. I'm a big fan of that. But if you look at the enemies on it once they're walking across it, they become quite illegible. And some of that is just that we have very dark, low contrast enemy designs. So there are a bunch of ways you can resolve that. One is to make the internal contrast of the characters higher, right? And we already have that distinction a little bit, because if you look at the textures on the ground, the tiles on the floor don't have hard black outlines, right? Which is kind of as it should be. We've got like a low contrast on the background so that it doesn't mess with the characters too much. But I think the internal contrast in the characters could be higher. And I think we can contrast the characters in the background a bit more by kind of making the background have a sort of key color to it instead of being grey on grey. Ooh, look at that. That's great. I am now a doom sloth. If we compare this in the last game, obviously a top-down action game and a platformer present different sets of challenges in terms of how you do combat and how you make feel combat, in terms of how you do combat and how you make the combat feel good. But the combat in this feels fun enough that I want to explore the rest of the content of the game. Whereas in MegaQuest, the combat felt a little bit like that thing of the character feels like an MMO character. They feel sort of like a RuneScape character. You press a button and they attack, but there's not really any fluidity to it. And this one isn't massively good in terms of how these combat animations feel, but they do feel kind of different for each weapon. And it's just a lot more forgiving to be seeing the combat from this angle. I think when you have combat that is very up close and very much trying to go for like a realistic art style and stuff, you just introduce lots of additional challenges for yourself. Like, that is not a great sword animation, but once we know that the other weapons sort of feel a bit different from each other, what does that do? Is that like a big smart bomb thing? Ah, cool. Yeah, I love that ability. So we got this sort of chargeable shield. Oh. So I walk into a space where there's lots of enemies. I put my spooky shield on. Oh. I really want to challenge one of these bosses before we end. Can I just do it from the start without charging up? No, I have to do the power seals first. I don't think I'm going to get good at this enough in the time available to actually see the boss. But you can see him. He's like a big, scary, moose-horned, sort of pagan god of the forest type thing. I like the way those little ballistas walk as well. It's kind of weird that they have gore that comes out of them because they look mechanical, but I think that's a nice strangeness. Yeah, the behavior variation of the enemies is great. And I think just the overall tone of it, it's like, kind of reminds me of Quake or something. Sort of, seems very committed to not doing standard fantasy and not doing standard, like, angels and demons or anything like that. It's a very strange set of kind of monsters and, oh. Yeah, so I would recommend checking this one out if you like the look of it. I think it's really good. I like the kind of world building that's going on here, even though it's very minimal and there's not much story being told, but the sense of the kind of general vibe of the creatures and the weaponry and everything is doing a lot in terms of just sort of this passive storytelling about what kind of world this is. I think most of the things that could be done to improve this game are like ramping up certain sound effects. Like when I die, it doesn't feel like there's a big sort of anti-celebration of dying, right? And stuff like that. And then just making the game more like visually clear. I think what I might even do with this one is when I edit down the video later, I'm going to pause it at some point and sort of illustrate some of the stuff I would tweak in terms of just like changing the colors by photoshopping a still of this. I think that could be quite helpful to see done, and I do that sort of stuff in yeah, the way that the gore kind of goes onto the environment all over the place and leaves kind of trap marks and stuff is really great. But yeah, I might do some little kind of visual edits to this in the edit and kind of show people how I would tweak this to make it more visually legible, because I think the camera is a little bit far in and moves a little bit too fast if you're kind of spinning around. But I also think there are some kind of color distinction issues, and when all the gore comes in, that kind of gets worse. I kind of like it in a way. You know, I think I was talking earlier in the week about how sometimes illegibility is part of a game's difficulty and it's on purpose, right? Like bullet hell games, that is a classic example of the game's difficulty partially comes from the game sort of overwhelming you like with too much stuff to process mentally. And I think there's a little bit of that going on here, but it's trying to work out whether that's an intentional part of the game design or not, I think. I just want to quickly check out how the camera movement in Hotline Miami works. Because it's just one of those things where, you know, when you're working in a genre and there is a game that is kind of considered one of the best in class of that game, go away, Discord overlay, then it does pay to actually go and play it briefly and research it properly. You know, there's this question of I've seen Tim Kaine answer this recently, of like there's this question of how much should developers play games, you know? And I think the question is more along the lines of how should developers play games? And one of the ways is to like actually really critically play games where you are sort of paying attention to a particular thing, how a particular thing is done in that game. Okay, so it looks like the camera movement that they've put into what was it called? Something Behind. The camera movement that they put into Lurking Behind does mirror this pretty well. Because in Hotline Miami, if I move my camera left, right, up, down, it does sort of quickly snap to where the character is looking. And it doesn't go that far ahead. So it seems like we've got a pretty one-to-one kind of cloning of how this works. We've just got much smoother attack animations in Hotline Miami as well. We've also got this feature where you can kind of look ahead. But that only works in Hotline Miami because we don't have all of those different abilities we need to map to the different buttons. And in the game we just played, you kind of need to map the abilities to the different buttons because you're kind of turning around and aiming with the right joystick. You don't then want to have all the attacks mapped to the face buttons because you can't pull a direction and press A, B, X, Y at the same time without doing some weird hook thing with your hand. So, control design is its own whole monster. And it boggles the mind, but the best thing you can usually do is just copy something else directly until you've worked out how your game needs to be different and then tweak it from there. But yeah, it seems like the way the camera moves in this is very similar to what we just played. Okay, let's check out Valkyrie Rosetta. And just to give you a little bit of a sort of sneak ahead here. Why is that upgrading again? Okay, hopefully that will get done by the time we got the next one. Ashes of Morgravia is a deck builder. I quite like the look of it. I'm sort of optimistically hopeful about Ashes of Morgravia because it's a genre that I like. I think the art style's cool, and I think I'm going to like it. Valkyrie Rosetta is a game I think I'm possibly not going to like, and I'm just gonna find the itch page for it. And I just want to say that up front because I like people to know my expectations because it's nice when you get pleasantly surprised by something, right? So Valkyrie Rosetta, you can already see from the way that this is designed, like the graphic design of this front thing, that is going for sort of old school Final Fantasy, right? It's kind of giving that vibe. You've even got this gradient here that looks like a Final Fantasy kind of logo. And I can also see it's going to be sort of turn-based JRPG style combat from the 90s. And I really want to like this, but historically I have not liked these games. And that is mainly because the combat in 90s JRPGs like Pokemon and sort of the older Final Fantasies, it's often there just to sort of justify the grind in the background of the game, right? So you're not making very interesting make or break decisions in the combat as you take turns attacking something. You're just kind of whittling it down, and the kind of efficiency of what you can do in that combat usually comes down to your gear and the other stuff you've been grinding for in the game. And it's kind of like, you know, if you see how people talk about free-to-play games nowadays, and it's like these are games that are designed to be really slow to eat up as much of your time as possible. That is generally how I feel about turn-based combat in those old JRPGs. And it's one of the reasons why, like, you know, I've been using RPG Maker since I was a teenager. I really like RPG Maker engines, but whenever I try and make anything in it, I am usually totally avoiding that battle system because I don't like it. I don't think it does anything that kind of encourages people to have to think particularly tactically or anything like that. So I already have a very strong bias against this type of game, and that means that if the kind of art and the world don't particularly grab me, then we're going to be a bit stuck here. But let's give it its due half an hour and see how we get on. An endless war. Today they call it the decisive battle, not because we are winning, but because everyone is at their wits' end. There's lots of lovely textures in this art. They rally shouting, "Victory is within reach," but my soldiers fall, one after another. They put a tantalizing skip cutscene button here that doesn't do anything. That's nice. I stand alone, 100 enemies before me, and I realize it doesn't matter if you're strong. In war, we're also doing anime, manga type stuff. How am I still alive? How many days have passed since that battle? That's a slightly goofy feeling walk animation with the kind of leaning forward. Feels a little bit like a rhino charging. But I love, like, this as an overall image. Like, all of this kind of glow and everything is very, very moody and cool and dreamlike. So, sort of already seeing some kind of strengths and weaknesses here in terms of art. This dead soldier, I can feel something from him. A Valkyrie? I knew I'm worthy. Did you speak to my mind? You have mistaken, I'm not a Valkyrie. I too was a soldier slain in this battlefield. I see we fought on opposite sides. I think when the soldier talks, then the main character's portrait needs to go away, right? Because in this kind of visual novel UX, when there's a character there, we expect the character to be the named character that is speaking. So I know you don't want to do a portrait for the soldier because he's not a primary character and that would be too much work. I get that, but that means when he's speaking, she needs to go away, right? Because it's already weird to have her little on the screen and her big portrait here. I know there will be fans of this genre that don't mind it, but yeah, the big portrait of her needs to only be visible when she is the named speaking character, because this is confusing. I can feel my soul slowly fading. I beg you. Take me. Take me with your horn. I don't care if you're an enemy. I can't leave this world just yet. ... I think I understand what must be done. Hi, Clifford. Yep, nearly at 10k subs. I have a video planned for when that happens. I'm waiting for a sunny day because I need to do some outside recording when it comes to that video. So we need a sunny day before I get to 10k subs, or we might just have to wait a little bit for the celebration. You saved me. You really are a Valkyrie. I am Bran. I said I'm not a Valkyrie. Is a Valkyrie simply born without knowing she is one? I can't say for certain how a Valkyrie is born. Again, I need a visual indicator of which character is the speaking one. I know it's very easy to say, well, you should be able to work out he's Bran and she's whatever her name is. But we have a standard way of doing this. And I think if you want to show them both, then you darken the one who's not speaking, you shrink them down a little bit, and then the one who's speaking gets kind of this level of brightness. So it sort of like goes between the two characters, and they kind of get lighter and darker and move forward and back slightly if you want to have that back and forth between two characters. But again, there shouldn't be a full-size character portrait for a character who is not currently speaking. I can't say for certain how a Valkyrie is born, but I am still a... Oh no, that's Rosetta. I'm still a human. Maybe you are, or you are not. What matters is that we are still nice. Oh, he's joining the party. I mean, he's doesn't look really up to it. He's laying on the floor. I don't want him in my party. He's got a big stick through him. What's this? This is really kind of creepy, this environment. I'm enjoying it. I think this walk animation feels very strange and sort of takes away from the sort of moody, somber tone of the game a little bit because of the kind of potential goofiness of it. And I think it really depends how charitable the person playing it is being. And I'm only being uncharitable about it and criticizing it because I know other people will be more mean about it and say, look at that kind of silly walk. But it's just the kind of leaning forward. It's sort of like a run. Like the way the legs are moving makes it feel like a run, but the arms aren't moving to match it as a run, right? And I think if you had the proper arm movement like a jog, then it would read fine. But sort of running with your head forward and your arms down by your side sort of looks like she's trying to poke someone with the horn on her helmet, you know? A ghoul has emerged from the dead bodies. Let us test our strength. It is the Naruto run, you're right. I'm ready. Our healing potion max quantity +1. That's a cool visual effect as well. But now it's hanging. For tutorial, pause game and see battle manual. The asking me to go and read a manual sort of makes the assumption that I care. And I don't at this stage. So if you want me to care enough to read a manual, then you're going to have to make me feel cool with whatever's going on in this battle. Attack mode. Items. These have controller mapping, so am I supposed to be playing this with the controller? I'm just pressing stuff. I don't know who I'm controlling or why. Oh, I see. Okay, so when they attack, you press the character's relative buttons to decide whether they defend or not. And then you just hammer the buttons to make them attack. Yeah. The thing is, I couldn't do much better than this in terms of animation, but that's why when I do make games, I don't make games where I'm required to make a sort of high quality character walk around, you know? We're already into grinding. We've done 5 minutes and we're already in this kind of state of defeat the same enemy a bunch of times, and this is just bringing me back to why I don't like classic JRPGs. Or, you know, I liked them when I was a kid. I liked the story. I liked the going around and getting loot. But as I've got older, this kind of model of grinding the same thing by doing a form of combat that doesn't feel particularly fun while you're doing it seems to just be mashing buttons. Now, I know that the game has told me that there is a manual for this combat, and I will be charitable this time and look at the manual, but that really needs to be baked in. Because people just aren't going to care enough to do that, right? The last time I remember sitting down and reading a manual for a game would have been something like a bullfrog game like Dungeon Keeper in the 90s when I was like 11 and very bored and had paid a lot of money for the game, right? And I think in this day and age, if people need to read a whole manual in order to engage with the system before they do, they're just gonna not play your game. Right, so let's have a look. So I can't get to the combat manual here. I think I can only get to the combat manual when I'm in combat, but I couldn't find the button to do that. Yeah, someone in the chat said, well, there's a kind of debate going on about whether it's alright to have different animation frames between the background and the characters. I do think there are certain things, like if you look at the VFX of the falling ash and stuff, if that was closer to the same frame rate as the character animations, it would make the character animations look better, because it would make it look like a stylistic choice rather than a creative limitation that is like a, you know, I'm doing less frames because I don't have enough time or resources, right? So every time you have a limitation like that, like this is the way my character animations look because of limitation, you need to make the rest of the game fit with that so that it looks deliberate, right? Because then players will be more forgiving of it. Let's have a look at the battle manual. turn has 2 modes: attack, defend. During attack mode, the player can execute 3 types of attack and use items: basic, skill, burst, item use. Basic attacks are triggered by pressing the corresponding button for each character in the party formation. BY. Okay. Skill attack. You hold down a trigger and then you... So each character in the party has a button on the controller. And then to do a skill attack, you hold LB and then do that button. To do a burst attack, you do right button and one of those buttons. Items are up. Burst points are gathered in various scenarios during battle. The player can strategize. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then defending is just a timing thing. Okay. So I'm guessing that because the way that the party is formed, he's at the top and she's at the right. She should be B on my controller and he should be Y on my controller. But it would help if they had a tag for that. I can see it come up at the top, right? Where it says their names and it has the buttons. You'll see it in a minute. But that's not as helpful to me as kind of seeing it contextually on the battlefield. Someone in the chat said the bloom feels a bit excessive. I would agree. If it's like this for the whole game and there's always some very big bloom thing, then it is going to feel kind of tiresome on the eyes and everything, because it sort of distracts you from the thing you're supposed to be paying attention to, right? Which is the characters. I got 20 midges, whatever that means. But I would sort of forgive it for trying to create this opening scene where we're like, oh wow, look at that, right? So if this is just the level of bloom for the intro because we were in a big fiery battlefield and then it calms down a bit later, then that's okay. But if every game environment has this crazy amount of bloom in the background, then I think it starts to hurt your eyes a little bit and kind of draw attention away from what you're supposed to be looking at. One of the things I would say about this visually, in terms of art, is that... I'm just going to hang out down here. I would say every individual part of what we can see here looks really beautiful, right? The idle characters, when they're not walking, you know, I've already made my jabs about the walk animation, and it is really just the lack of arm movement that makes it look bad. It's not a bad animation overall, it's just not how people run. But if we look at this kind of relatively still with the idle animation, I would say that this looks gorgeous. Like if we look at the these like the parallax layers and sort of how handcrafted everything looks, I'm willing to forgive there being a kind of weird thing going on with how many animation frames and stuff there are, because it looks so handcrafted, and I think that is a big appealing thing for people in the first place. I think the run animation really just needs some arm movement, and I think the falling black dust maybe needs to go at the same frame rate as the other stuff. If it had a stutter in that effect, so it only moved every 3 times a second or whatever, then everything would feel more cohesive. But the individual parts are all really, really appealing. There's just something about them that's slightly mismatched in places in terms of like timings and stuff like that. And so the combat is, I don't hate it, because at least it's sort of admitting what it is. It's not doing Final Fantasy VII or Pokemon where it's trying to make us think it's a really tactical game, but it's just about spamming the same move. At least we have an honest battle system that is literally just spamming the buttons in different ways with like slight modifications, right? What I don't like is the kind of metagame structure of we are just walking in a straight line fighting a dude over and over again. Which is what happens when you have JRPG combat, because it's built around that structure. We go through a room, we go through the next room, and in each one there's a ghoul and we fight the ghoul. And there's also one behind us to stop us going back that way. So this kind of feels like, a lot of JRPGs used to have challenge towers in, where you would go and just fight enemies in a long row. And like Darkest Dungeon did one as well, with the kind of Lovecraftian farm with the alien stuff. Spoiler if you haven't played that Darkest Dungeon DLC. But it feels like that challenge tower mode that you would get. Yeah, I think burst points are kind of like a limit break. I need to do R1 to do a burst attack. That's a burst attack. Right, that's cool, right? But we're getting a lot of these simple ghouls to fight before we have anything that's really a challenge, and that really means that I'm not getting a chance to... We've got a sort of stuck animation sound going on there. I'm not really getting a chance to need to use these more advanced techniques yet, and I think I would like that a bit sooner. You know, give me like... Give me like 2 basic enemies before I get something that I need to actually use a challenge attack on, because it just felt like a little bit too grindy there with how many basic ghouls we got in a row. Rosetta, thanks to mighty Odin. I thought you were dead. I keep jumping during the dialogue as well, which is quite funny that you can do that. I think that's more charming though than a bug. I wouldn't change that. Lucas. Rosetta has Matt Berry's voice for some reason. Lucas, what are you doing here? What do you mean? Everyone said you were dead. I needed to come here. Are you hurt? I healed myself. I'm better now. I would have dragged your body with me even if you were dead. Why would she leave you? Midges is the currency. Later, maybe, she was also hurt. What? No, she is at the castle celebrating. I barely got a hold of her. Banquet with the king. They said she would be named a hero. The ashes have also reached here. It should have been you. You are. I got to go. Someone in the chat said, what's the link between ghouls and Norse myth? I completely forgot this was Valkyrie based with all the ghouls. Yeah, so I think they're doing what happens in a lot of sort of anime stuff, where they're sort of drawing on world mythologies in a very loose way, you know, which I think is fine. Let's go back home. I can't wait to... I'm sorry. I'll be going alone. You'll leave me here? I'm sorry. You're not going to tell him? I can't bring myself to tell him about it yet. That I'm an undead Valkyrie. Yeah, I think it's playing sort of quite kind of fast and loose with the Norse thing. I don't think it's meant to be a full-on, you know, using the myth in a very kind of strict to the historical version way. Which could go either way, right? It could disappoint some people that want it to be a hardcore Norse mythology game, but I don't mind it. We're seeing a bit of a toning down of the background. The bloom is still a little bit overwhelming, but I love the art vegetation type stuff. I don't like that this tree is stretching under me. And it feels a bit strange that we have these very harsh black outlines on the characters and then nothing in the environment is outlined. And I think one way of solving that would just be to sort of wash out the outlines in the characters a bit more. Because if you look at the environment, there's very little sort of harsh black in the environment. And I think if the characters' outlines were just a little bit more of a sort of charcoal grey rather than a black, it would make up for that kind of disparity. Again, I think this is like every element on the screen looks gorgeous. They just don't really go together 100%. Yeah, the environments are really nice. And I've turned the sound down a bit because we were getting quite a lot of repetitive slashing in some of the previous games. But the atmosphere, that the kind of the mix of the kind of VFX of all the falling ashes and the fire and the drone in the background is really cool. And this is why I told you at the start of this game that I thought I wasn't going to like it, because I really enjoy when we get this turnaround where I'm like, yeah, actually, there's a lot to write home about with this game once we get rid of the silly Rhino run. And what I'm hoping for now is a combat where we actually get to use some of these burst skills and it doesn't feel like a overkill because I'm just two people fighting a zombie. So the combat is basically button bashing, but you sort of... there's a lot of kind of stuff where you have to time things right and where you can choose the flavor of button bashing by kind of holding down an additional button to make them execute special skills. So I don't think I can do that right now because I don't have enough points. I'm sort of not really engaged with the combat enough to really critique it at a kind of interface level. I'm sure there are certain things about the combat that could be communicated better, but because it's not particularly difficult and I can get through every combat by mashing the buttons, I can't really see how you would communicate the mechanics more clearly or anything like that. Was that undead? Yes, it was one of Grandis. Perhaps a comrade. I could barely recognize it beneath its rotting flesh. Let me go back up in the corner. I can't imagine seeing a friend turned that way. There's someone over there. She passed not long ago. We could have done something. What happened? She was once my subordinate. I trained her, but she chose to leave. Can you hear me? Is that you, General? What happened to you? I followed a cloaked figure. Then I was ambushed by an undead soldier. I should have stayed. I'm worried about the children. They're all low. Is she like me? Do you still want to fight? If I could have another chance, I should have fought bravely. Then come with me. It's, Sybil. That's the cloaked figure. I feel like this is a Procreate game. I feel like every art asset in this game was drawn on Procreate because it's got that kind of messy, traditional materials, but like impossibly high contrast kind of thing going on. That's the cloaked figure. Damn you! I'm a cloaked figure. Thank you, I am available for voiceover work. Let's chase it. She looks a bit like Jodie Comer. I think that's who that is. Sybil joins the party. Continue running in a straight line. Leave her on the ground. Do we go back? Oh, we go back that way because that's where the masked figure went. Right, 5 more minutes with this one. And then we're gonna get some cards. Get some cards on the go. Lucas! Don't let it pass! I can't turn around either. Stupid soldier. Oh no! They Chekhov's gunned us with the wobbly tree trunk. Aww. I believe this is where, if I was a Gen Z, I would say it's giving mother. Slay, Mommy Rosetta. I'm still alive. I don't think you are alive. I think you're an undead. It's an undead mage. Rosetta? This is a work of necromancy. You had wings. I saw them with mine own eyes. Listen to me. I have no idea what happened back there. I'm sorry I wasn't on that battle and I regret it. Look at me. Is there something you want to tell me? Yeah, they don't get up after they join you. I feel like it's a small thing, but it does feel kind of funny that they're in your party and she's just like, I'm just having a rest. Call me when there's a fight. I'm just going to lay on the floor here for a bit. You can trust me. It's just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. You and I. And your funky helmet. Darius says, I suspect they're dead. Yeah, I think the deal is, right? Rosetta here, she's just become a Valkyrie. But they haven't given her any proper workplace training. She just showed up to the afterlife after a battle. And they said, look, you can be a Valkyrie. You've already got the helmet for it. Look at your helmet. And they just started giving her Valkyrie powers. She hasn't done proper health and safety training. She hasn't done her BTEC level 3 Valkyrie certificate. And she's just going around raising the dead, as a Valkyrie would, to take them to the halls of Valhalla. And she doesn't really know what she's doing. And now she's sort of collecting this menagerie of sort of ghosts. And that's why their bodies are laying on the floor and not getting up and walking. Because she's a Valkyrie and not a necromancer. She dead. They all dead. It's the Sixth Sense JRPG edition. Spoiler alert for The Sixth Sense, a film that came out 20 years ago. I was dead, Lucas. It was real. It was darkness. It felt like eternity. And then I breathed. I felt a power within me. I can speak with the dead. The souls of fallen soldiers fight by my side. To put it simply, I have gained powers akin to a Valkyrie. So, we've got 2 minutes before we need to move on to the next game, and I want to talk briefly about this writing, because I don't think it's terrible, right? I think it suits the genre, and I think when I think of like who this would appeal to, it is generally people that play RPGs and are into like retro RPGs and stuff. And tonally, all of the writing that I've seen, there've been a few little goofy grammatical things that we can kind of ignore, but tonally it feels right for the genre, and I don't kind of mind it. It's cheesy, but it's kind of supposed to be cheesy. It's a cheesy genre of game. What I'm sort of missing that I would like, those are some very UK qualifications. Yes, they are. What I would like is a little bit more context for who Rosetta is. We sort of understand she's a general. She's had subordinates. She's had people that she's trained. But we've sort of jumped straight into this new state of her life where she's not alive. She's a Valkyrie. And we don't really have much sense of who she was before that or what her personality was like. And we don't really have time to play enough of the game to see if that comes out yet. But, you know, if you think of superheroes, right? Someone like Batman is interesting because of the contrast between what we know about Bruce Wayne's kind of public persona and what we know about Batman. And here it's just like we're only getting the Batman. We've got a newly born superhero of sorts who has special powers, and she's a little bit shocked by it, and she's in this situation where she like doesn't know what's going on. But we don't really know enough about who she was before because we've started on the battlefield, right? And I think maybe if we were to tutorialize this game's combat system and stuff like that in a bit more of a normal world situation before we get to the battlefield, then we could make the most of the battlefield, because we could make those ghoul combats a little bit more threatening, have a little bit more danger in those early combats with we're in a scary environment. We're in a very creepy environment with fire and corpses everywhere and stuff like that. And treating that as the tutorial of the game sort of robs us of an opportunity to see what our main character's life is like before they become a Valkyrie. So I would just think a little bit about that and in terms of like narrative pacing, because I want a little bit more of the backstory of this person before they become a sort of super angel. And I don't know if that's something that will kind of resonate with other people who might play this game, but personally it makes the character feel a bit flat, that they are just immediately this sort of superhero character. So I'm just going to shrink my face back down again for those of you who you know, have what's that phobia where people don't like small holes. If I go really big like this, then you can see the pores on my face, and if you've got that phobia, you'll probably not have a good time. So we're going to go to Ashes of Morgravia. I've actually got it here because I downloaded the itch version, but then I was sent a key for the Steam version, which I think is more up to date. So let's jump into this. It's going to have some cards. I believe Background Blur are in the chat today. I don't know if any of the other... Yeah, trypophobia, that's it.
The well of origin awoke. As darkness consumed the land, creatures twisted by the well's touch spilled into our world. Amidst the chaos, a lone hero, eyes aflame with golden determination, faces the abyss. And when even the bravest hearts may falter, a true God-woken spirit never yields.
Okay. If you want that voiceover to sound a bit more cinematic, just a little bit more compression on it will make it sound less dry. Analytics disclaimer. What I like to see in a card game.
Morgravia.
The Harbinger, you awaken God-woken, called forth by whispers that defy the corruption spreading in the eternal night. I am the Harbinger, a guide to those chosen to bear the weight of this dying world. If you have text like this, if you break it up so that there's less on each of these panels, people will generally have an easier time with it. You know, I make this font maybe 50% bigger and then have half as much text per click, because people get impatient and start skipping stuff if there's like too much text on screen at once. Morgravia crumbles, consumed by the well's hunger, its people lost to despair and the dead that walk among them. But you, God-woken, you may yet offer the faintest spark of hope. Who are you in this shattered realm? That's a lot of dialogue options. What happened to this? I don't care what happened to this world, I just got here. Who are the God-woken?
Rosetta.
You are the God-woken, shaped by divine hands, but bound by mortal struggles. Created from Gospodar's tears, you carry the faintest spark of divinity. You are chosen to walk where the gods could not, to challenge what looms in the eternal night. But remember, God-woken, divinity does not mean infallibility. Your choices will shape not only your fate, but the fate of all. Yeah, the comic book art is fantastic. Just the text's a little bit small. I don't want to know all these things. I don't want to know these things yet. Give me game before lore. The problem with giving lore before game is people don't know if they want to be invested in the story until they know what the activity of the game is. So you want to do as little of this as possible before people have played the game. I know it provides helpful context, but you just can't expect people to care about it before they know what the game is, you know? TechRight in the chat said, I'm one of those people that looks for the option that clearly moves on to the gameplay, yeah? You know what we need here. I feel a bit more okay with ragging on this game than the others because Background Blur Studios are in the chat. So you know what we need in this what we need in this dialogue sequence is this.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
Oh, I am enjoying this scene.
Get on with it!
Get on with it.
That's we need this dialogue option. Get on with it. Okay, we're choosing some sort of class. Maybe I need to queue that video up and have it for whenever we're playing a fantasy game with a lore dump. I'm just gonna have a macro on my OBS to play the Monty Python "Get on with it" sketch. Arbiter is our kind of warrior class. Bastion is a sort of tank type thing. Pentinent is a sort of holy one. We're going to start with this. We're getting a card draw ability when we slay an enemy. That's a nice combination of things for an aggressive character because it speeds up your deck and also kind of encourages you to kill stuff, right? So you can already see how these kind of character builds are given their character, which is nice. Completing a desolation. To complete a desolation, reach the final node on the right and defeat the boss. The desolation consists of different nodes and their connection. Nodes can present challenges, rewards, or offer a way to restore health or remove tormenting cards. Hover over a node to reveal a tooltip with more information. You can only move to a connected node on the right. You cannot return to previously visited nodes. Plan ahead. The nodes you choose will shape your path forward. During this stage, you can switch. Okay, we've got an inventory. So we're playing as a character, sort of like Slay the Spire. We're going from left to right. It's kind of like a FTL sector map where we can't go back. I hope there is some sort of in-world explanation for why we can't go back. You know, in FTL, it's like you're being chased by a fleet. Bad North has this as well with the kind of Vikings chasing you through the islands. So, you know, we've had a big old lore dump in this game. I hope there are good in-game explanations for some of these mechanics. So we have 4 fights at the start. And then fights, and then fights, and then fights, and then fights. And the problem with this from the outset is that all of these are identical from my perspective because there's so much hidden information about what the fights are or what we'd get out of the fights. So at the moment, I want to get a tier or an unknown. These are the things that are appealing to me. I don't really want to go to an elite fight because I don't know the benefit of doing so. So the fastest route to get here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's not any difference, so I'm just going to kind of start here, I think. You'll master 2 unique decks. Stride deck for movement and positioning, Clash deck for combat and abilities. Each deck is tied to its respective phase during every round. Okay. And we have a kind of movement grid as well. There's a lot of stuff here in terms of new stuff to learn for people that have played this genre. Click on the card in your hand to view its possible effects and targets. The card's range or area of effect will be highlighted on the battlefield. Choose a target, self-targeting cards, enemy targeting cards, area of effect cards. Okay. Again, I think this is okay for a demo tutorial, but a lot of this stuff should be explanatory when we're using the cards during gameplay. So let's kind of see what happens. And these are enemy intents, where they tell us what they're going to do, so we can respond to that. How to get back to the tutorial, that question mark up there. Okay, so this is me, and I can zoom out. Can I drag the camera around? Yeah, I can, sort of. Doesn't have the kind of middle mouse click drag that you usually have in kind of RTSs and MOBAs, but you can move the camera around with WASD. And then we've got this kind of lovely hand-drawn tabletop that looks like a D&D map. Kind of looks like I'm playing Gloomhaven or something like that. And these are my cards. So I've got a movement ability here. So in the first phase where I'm doing movement, I've got cards that give me movement. I've got cards that up my stats. Draw cards from the Clash deck and gain faith. And then the only enemy I've got here is looking to block. So I'm just going to stand here and buff myself, I think. but the cards are not responding to me now. What's going on? I think I might have broken something. I'm just going to skip that turn because I got into some sort of locked state with the cards there. Yeah, I think this game looks great. Right, Punishing Blow. So click on the ability, click on him. Yeah, I want to set him on fire. I think when you click on the card, it feels like it needs some other state to tell you that it's waiting for activation. It's like I click on the card, then I go to click on the guy, but there's like a sort of missing state in the UI. Okay, so I'm not going to move. So he's going to... I think that means he'll make an attack of opportunity if I walk away, as far as I can tell. See, like, I click that to activate this teleport ability, and then I can click away. But because I'm in this state where this card is waiting for another input, it feels like it should do a highlight or something to show us that this is the card that is being activated on the battlefield. I'm going to teleport right over here, just to try out some of these abilities, really. And then I'm clicking on that to gain movement. I can't really see how that is where I would click to activate that. So there's a few little kind of UX things here that aren't totally clear, and then I'm back in this state where I've got cards that say they cost 0. When you have a self-targeting card, you should click on yourself. Okay, yeah, so... But again, I've sort of got into this weird state where it feels a bit locked. Okay, I got some more move. I'm going to move over here, and I can do that again. I click on myself. But yeah, I love this idea of doing like a little kind of D&D skirmish combat with cards. That kind of works really well for me. I think there are some steps in the interface that are maybe missing, but they're not big breaking things. So this is a negative card. If it stays in your hand at the end of your phase, lose 1 faith. So I'm going to get rid of that. I got an ironclad helm. Can I put my ironclad helm on? Sure. I'm pretty sure it's just better to have a helm than not. Yeah, I do like the fact that the cards animate. What is that? How do I find out about the enemies as well? I'll zoom in on them. He's got 45 health. This one's got 30 health. That one's going to be sniping me from a distance, so I should get up close to it. And can I move around it so I can get on the other side? Is that a thing I can do? Yeah, the self-targeting abilities are a little bit confusing. Right, I'm going to give myself motivation and block. So basically, in Slay the Spire and similar games, it's like you are always using the same resource to play attacks or blocks. So you're always making this base decision on every turn of whether to prioritize blocking or attacking. But here, the blocking happens in the sort of preparation and movement phase, and then you attack separately, which is an interesting thing. I think it might make it quite difficult to sort of hold your decks of cards in your head and plan them long term, but we'll see. There's a lot of interesting ideas here. That was not in range. So that let me draw attacking cards in the prep phase. That's cool. Get rid of that. Don't want that. So his faith is like the mana resource because we're all sort of witch huntery type characters, I think. I quite like that as well because if you have a theme that is like witch hunters fighting undead, then you sort of have a good reason to not make as much variety of stuff, but it feels like it's keeping with the theme of the game to make less stuff, right? Rather than just like, oh, you made less stuff because you couldn't make as much stuff. If you've got a much narrower theme, then it sort of justifies why you might have less variety of stuff, I guess. I think I've lost my hand of cards here. I don't know what I've done to... Have I eaten all my cards? They all gone. I'm stuck. I don't know if I've got into a broken state here, if I'm just not understanding what's going on. Yeah, bug. Okay, we'll go back. It's all good. This is why I very rarely work on my own games, because this is exactly the type of game I would like to make, and I can already see how difficult it is to build the sort of states for a turn-based game. Whenever I do game jams, I always end up making silly little action games, even though that's not really what I'd want to play or make, because the type of games I would want to play require a lot of engineering that is very difficult to do. Pick a card to add. No, the devs said they thought it was a bug, so I thought we'd restart as quick as possible just to make sure we see as much of the game as we can in the time. If the dev thinks it's a bug, then it's probably a bug. Bro, you're gonna get smited. I don't know what the past tense for smite is. It's smote, isn't it? Bro got smote. I'm gonna give you broken guard, whatever that means. He's grappling me. I'm gonna block, even though you're blocking. Let's just stand here and block each other. That's interesting. Scope Sheep said they feel turn-based is easier than action. Very, very interesting. I think I just enjoy programming like movement and explosions and stuff. Like, I find that really fun. Whereas like the information architecture required to have a deck of cards or have turn-based stuff is a lot of, you know. I think if you're coming from more of a programming background where you've kind of programmed software rather than just games, then there's probably a little bit less kind of daunting stuff there. Let's get some supplies. Pick one of 3 random cards with a profane keyword or leave. Okay, that's cool. I can see the theme working there. Like, we've gone to a stinky old camp, we're salvaging stuff, and that's going to determine what type of cards we get to pick from. That's a nice idea. I don't want a tired card. Why would I want to put tired in my deck? Guarded strike. Yeah, let's go for the defensive one. There's a disengage resource that allows you to presumably walk past characters without giving them an attack of opportunity, which is quite cool. I'm gonna smite you. I'm gonna punish you. There we go. There's a lot of opportunity here for really big combos of cards, which is nice. Like, if you have a situation where someone can play the cards in a particular order that gives them a way bigger advantage than if they just did it randomly without thinking, then you know you're onto a winner a little bit. You know, it's kind of like, I can't remember who... was anyone here in the chat when we were playing Hexagod last week? I can't remember if it was someone who was here was saying about, like, I was clearly no-braining that game. I was just doing random choices and it wasn't really making the game any harder. Whereas here, I just had a round where, because of the order that I played the cards in, I was able to, like, get so much more damage out than if I'd have just randomly selected stuff. Right, they're gonna... He's only got 3 health left. We'll give him a little bonk on the head. You can build your deck around the Torment cards. Yeah, I love that. Like, one of my favorite builds in Slay the Spire was the Ironclad build where whenever you draw curses, you, like, breathe fire or something like that. I think that's what it was. And you would just deliberately take on all of these curses in order to generate more damage. And it just made your deck feel like such a cool, sort of weird slot machine. So if that's a possibility in this, then that's great. He's got it. That Necrotic Shroud is really powerful. I've got some Wanderer's Boots. Put your clothes on. I received a tired card. Oh, is the card tired? Oh, sleepy little card. Need to go nap. Let's go to a tier. Pick a random card to be added to your deck, or forget a card from one of your decks. Oh, sweep. That's like a crowd control ability for when you're surrounded. That's cool. Craney said, what's the most vital game design principles in designing an RTS game? I would say... I would say, if you want to know about RTS games, listen to the Designer Notes episodes with Rob Pardo. Because he talks a lot about designing Warcraft in those episodes. And, you know, as much as we love YouTube and having parasocial relationships with random game design YouTubers on here, if there's an interview with the designer of Warcraft 1, 2, and 3 that you can listen to instead, that's probably a much better place to get advice on designing an RTS than from me, a guy who has worked on a bunch of random free-to-play games and never an RTS. I did get one of the things I got started on back in the early 2000s when I was a teenager was the Warcraft 3 level editor. Probably one of my favorite game making tools ever. But yeah, I just put a link for you, Craney, in the chat to that podcast because I think you would find it really helpful. Right, we're going to do this as our last combat, and then we'll do a little kind of Q&A for 10 minutes before I get on and go and do something else. So who have we got here? We've got Spooky Ghost, we've got Choppy Skeleton, and we've got the Evil Butler over here. Stream's going a bit blurry for me, so sorry if it drops out again. I had really bad connection earlier, and I will be editing down this later on and posting a video version of it with all the randomness cut out. So if there's any bits of the stream you'd miss, there will be a catch-up. Right, where's that teleport that I had? I don't have it. Okay. Where have I gone? Ah. Yeah, I think there are just some sort of confirmation stages in this where you're kind of clicking through cards and deciding where to use them, where it's just a little bit confusing and unclear. But I like the game as a whole. I think there's a lot of stuff here to like. I like the theme. I like the sort of grim fantasy stuff. I like the idea of the characters I've seen so far and how they differ from each other. Definitely going to be interested to see how this one develops. Yeah, so Background Blur, the developer in the chat, just said if you click on a enemy, you can see their sheet. Okay. What I would do there then, I think it might be good to work out some rules about how you use the left and right mouse button. Because one of the issues I'm having is, like, if I click on an ability and it goes to the stage where I'm supposed to be clicking somewhere on the map to target where the ability goes, I'm then very, very conscious of what left click does because I don't want to, like, action a choice that I didn't mean to make. So using left click to get information out of things, that opens this sheet here, right? It's a little bit confusing because I'm feeling quite anxious about using left click because I think it's going to trigger something that I've accidentally clicked. So I would think about using right click for certain things like bringing up information or something like that. I'm not sure. And then also just like a general control design thing. If you have a map like this that you can scroll around with WASD, I think people are very used to being able to click down the mouse wheel and drag the map around as well. That's like a very standard thing in sort of top-down map-based games. So there's definitely a few tweaks to the control design here that I think could make things safer, but at the moment it's mainly the confirmation step after I click on a card, because visually going from this where I haven't clicked on the card, I haven't chosen to do it, right? Let me just pick the actual card I want to do. I don't want to do any of these right now, but like now I've clicked on the card, but the state of the game looks exactly the same as when I was going through the cards. It's just that card is kind of locked in place. So I think we need another state where this is sort of glowing to let us know that it's what we're activating on the battlefield. I'm going to just skip my turn because I can't do any of the things. Right, this spooky one, it has an ability called Abandon Hope. A lot of these aren't very descriptive as well. Some of these tooltips for what the abilities do of the enemies, they're sort of flavor text rather than rules text. But what I can see generally is if this guy is like something that enhances the other guys, maybe. I don't know if these affect the other characters, if this is like a buffing character. But I can't get to him anyway because he's on the other side of the battlefield, so I'll just focus on trying to fight this guy. Gains to Providence. See, that's like explaining the word using the word. Dark Providence. Gain some Providence. Okay, thanks. Stride phase. Am I locked again? I think I might have got a bug again because my deck is not drawing. Yeah, I think we're stuck again on that one, which is unfortunate because I kind of really like this. It's quite a hard one to play in a half-an-hour stream because I'm sort of rushing to try and keep things interesting and see as much of the game as possible, but definitely a cool basis for something here. I'm gonna just exit out of that. There's always silly bugs. But yeah, no, thanks for submitting that one. I thought that one was wicked. And I think everyone who submitted their games this time, I sent you invites to our Discord. So yeah, the way our Discord works is if your game is on Indies Under the Knife, you get in the Discord. If you support the channel financially via Discord or a YouTube membership, you get in the Discord. And that means that you also become potentially part of our monthly stream. So I do a monthly stream. I think it's usually the last Wednesday of the month where people who are part of our Discord submit their games for playtesting and review and stuff. We haven't yet got to the point where there's been too many games for me to do in that, but we might start to get there soon. We might need to do 2 streams, or I might just need to make it longer. But yeah, those of you who have submitted games and that I've played them this week, do use your Discord invites if I sent you them, because it's a fun community and you can make a thread for the games that you're currently making and post about it there as well, which is quite helpful for getting feedback, and particularly on things that it's easy to feedback on. So we've had a lot of discussions about UI and art styles recently because, you know, playtesting is more time consuming to get people to do, right? You need to get someone to give you half hour of their time. But with stuff like visual feedback, people can very quickly look at something and go, don't like that font, or can't really see what's going on here, that kind of thing. But yeah, I really like this one. Definitely be interested to check this out again in a couple of months and see where you've got to with it, because it's got some cool ideas going on. I think there are a few things that maybe worry me about the design, right? Like the 2 decks is a cool idea. And I would really have to play this for a much longer period of time to see what the long-term ramifications of having the 2 decks is. But I quite like that you have 2 decks that are both used in this combat game. I don't know if any of you ever played Griftlands before by Clay, where it's like a sci-fi deck builder and you have a combat deck and then you have a sort of a dialogue and negotiation deck. And I just felt like that game was doing too many disparate things that didn't really feel like they matched up, and the kind of dialogue mini game using one deck felt a little bit too similar to the combat one, and it just didn't work for me. This is using 2 decks to sort of achieve 2 different things, and it's like a movement and preparation deck and a combat deck. It's a really interesting idea. It felt like it made sense when I was playing with it for that very short period of time, but I definitely have to play the game for much longer to get a sense of how that really plays out, because I mean, that's the nature of strategy games, isn't it? They are long and slow, and I guess the kind of the measure of a strategy game is, can you start the game saying, oh, I'm going to make a fire-breathing curse build, and then pull it off, right? That's the satisfaction. And I think what deck builders bring to the table is it's such a good balance of having a strategy where you want to do a particular thing, but also having to just tactically respond to the opportunities you get, whether it's on the battlefield or the cards you choose between matches and stuff like that. I think that's why people like them, and everything I've seen here shows me that you understand all of those things, and you're not just kind of doing it because, oh, they're hot right now, which is like the worst way of choosing what to make, right? When people just kind of chase a genre because it's popular and they don't understand like what the baseline appeal of it is. Whereas this, you know, we had some bugs, we had some kind of UI bugs. There were a few little issues with the way the UI was communicating that I think are quite easy to fix. But like overall, I did get the sense that you totally understand how this genre works and how to do it well. And from here on, it's just a case of just fixing little issues and kind of iterating on what the different cards are and stuff like that. But I think this is a really neat game. Cool art direction, cool theme. I'm always happy when people do fantasy and sort of narrow it down to a specific flavor of fantasy instead of just like level 1, we are going to fight a goblin and a slime now. You know, we've got this kind of like dark fantasy witch hunt thing here, which kind of gives it its own flavor and also makes the sort of the stuff in the decks and the enemies all make sense as well, because we're not trying to reach too wide into the kind of fantasy set of things that we're used to. So yeah, really cool. And just to, I think every game we had some, every game this week had some really strong points, and I'm glad that they were kind of, I think this grouping them together by a theme worked pretty well. So just before I log off, I show you the other streams we've got coming up, and you can go and watch them or whatever, so you get a reminder when they happen. But the next time we do this next week, we've got games with weird and wild aesthetics over here. And then we're going to have a kind of puzzle horror thing. Because I've tried doing like horror specific videos or streams before. And one of the problems I found is horror isn't actually a game genre. It's like a mood or a tone. And it's like, okay, these games are similar in that they're trying to scare you. But it's not a gameplay genre, so it's very hard to just take a bunch of games labeled horror and compare them, because some of them are just trying to scare you and they're just scary walking sims, and some of them are doing other stuff, like it's a combat game or it's a puzzle game. So I specifically grouped together puzzle horror games for the stream in 2 weeks' time, because I thought that would be a more interesting way of comparing things. So trying to do these streams of 4 games at a time so that we just get through more games, because I mean, Background Blur, and I know one of the other developers this week sort of sent me a new build or a message to say, oh, it's been updated, you know, please make sure you've got the new game, because otherwise, yeah, I've got stuff in my spreadsheet that was submitted in January, and some of those games have completely moved on from now, right? So the more we can do in a week, the more quickly I can get devs games looked at and get them back to them, rather than them waiting 3 months and then me playing a build that is out of date. Exactly. Stefan said horror games for the current generation, receiving a phone call from an unknown number. Yeah, I mean, I'm a millennial and I still hate that. Like, it doesn't even have to be unknown. It can just be a family member. It's just like text me why you're calling me before you call me, so that I don't think that you're like laying at the bottom of a mine shaft with your legs broken or something, because unsolicited phone call, even from someone I know, suggests a degree of urgency that then freaks me out. Hi, Furfur. Good afternoon. I am literally just about to log off because we've been doing this stream for 2 hours, which I know is not long for some streamers, but you have to remember I'm an elderly weakling. And I also want to make sure that what we just went through gets edited down and uploaded as its own video, because we had a lot of like dips in the stream because my internet service provider, PlusNet in the UK, is very poo. And if you're watching this, PlusNet, I've already sent you an email in the last couple of weeks saying, fix my internet. I pay you for good internet. You don't give me the good internet. And you sent me an email saying you fixed it. And yet today, it was broken again. I don't know how any of this works, but you should give me money back every time it's broken. Yeah, but exactly. Phone calls are for emergencies, right? Do not call me without texting first, unless like something is broken or you're being chased by something. And even then, I'm probably not the best person to call. I have no medical abilities. I have no combat abilities. You're probably better off just calling the emergency services if there's an actual emergency, because I'll just go... I'm only good at telling people when a user interface doesn't work. How is that helpful in an emergency? TechRight says PlusNet are horrible. Very overpriced. Yeah. So if you're watching PlusNet, it's not just me. TechRight in the chat also thinks that you're a terrible company and not very good. Darius is doing a callback to when I was a doctor of skeletons. I'm not really a doctor of skeletons, unfortunately. What is the name for a bone doctor? Is there a name for a doctor that is a bone specialist? An orthopedic surgeon, of course. I never think of ortho as meaning bones. Does it mean bones? Bones, joints, and structures that enable movement, such as ligaments, tendons, muscles, and nerves. To be fair, I do get sent so many games about skeletons that we could do another skeleton special probably quite soon. I'm not going to repeat that, Stefan, but it did make me chuckle. Right, I am going to log off and go and try and do something else productive. Thank you all for joining today. I hope you enjoyed this new format. There were a few people that were like, we like the deep dive videos, don't do 4 games at once, but I just want to make sure people get their game seen as quick as possible, you know? And the thing about doing games on YouTube is, like, the views on a single game video that's a game that no one's heard of before, they're just not very good, right? So I'll always do some sort of design deep dives because it's the heart of what the channel is about. But if I do a video that's like just a random indie game no one's ever heard of and me talking about it for half an hour, it's just like, that's for a niche audience. And the niche audience is all 20 people in this chat right now out of the entire world. Thank you, folks. And yeah, we will be back with another similar one of these the same time next week. And some other stuff in the interim. We'll probably be on streaming some art and doodling over the next couple of days because I've got more of that to do. But those aren't scheduled. Those are just as and when I can fit them in. So